Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. So, our next very enthralling panel will discuss on the theme of cyclicals versus seculars, the bigger opportunity over the next 3 years. Without taking any further time, let me go straight to the point and introduce our esteemed panelists, ladies and gentlemen. We have eminent panelists with us. Let me introduce Mr. Samit Vartak, who is the founding partner and CIO at Sage One Investment Managers. He's a CFA charter holder, has worked closely with various companies in the US and India, advising them on business strategy, profit optimization, growth, and valuation. He returned to India in 2006 after spending a decade in the USA, working initially in corporate strategy with Gap Incorporated and PwC Consulting, and then with Deloitte and Ernst & Young, advising companies on business valuations and M&A. Warm welcome to you, Mr. Vartak. Let me now introduce to you, ladies and gentlemen, our next panelist, Mr. Mehul Jani. Mr. Mehul Jani is the Senior Executive Vice President and Fund Manager, listed equity at IIFL Asset Management. And prior to joining IIFL, Mr. Mehul Jani worked at DSP BlackRock, where he was a fund manager and analyst. Mr. Mehul Jani joined DSP BlackRock in October 2008 as an analyst in the equities team. And between 2004 to 2008, he was employed at Morgan Stanley PLC London as an associate working with structured product valuations and fund derivatives. He's a CFA charter holder and holds an MSc in banking and international finance. Once again, a warm welcome to you, Mr. Jani. Let me now introduce you to Mr. Charandeep Singh, ladies and gentlemen, the founder and fund manager of Girik Capital. He jointly leads the investment decision-making process at Girik, and he has over 2 decades of experience in capital markets. Mr. Charandeep's experiences include more than 10 years of investing in India, prior to which he was with Lehman Brothers as a director in the investment banking division Global Leveraged Finance Group based in New York and London. He also holds a diploma in accounting and finance from the London School of Economics and Political Science and is a master in finance from London Business School, graduated in 2002. A very warm welcome to you, Mr. Charandeep Singh. Ladies and gentlemen, this eminent session is going to be moderated by Mr. Naveen Chandramohan, who is the founder and principal fund manager at ITIS Capital. Now, he is responsible for running the fund, and he takes all the portfolio and risk decisions at ITIS. Mr. Chandramohan has had an illustrious career which spans over 15 years in the financial services sector, having worked across fund management, fundraising, and fundamental research. He began his financial services career with Lehman Brothers in Tokyo as a senior analyst in the capital markets trading desk. A very warm welcome to you, Mr. Naveen Chandramohan. He's our moderator, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm going to hand over the proceedings to him. Mr. Chandramohan, welcome, and I would request you to please take it away.
Thanks a lot for this, Aishwarya, and thanks everyone for doing this. So I just thought I'll lay the context for our conversation today, and then hand it over and set the context for how we're going to take this discussion forward. So investors and analysts like stories and themes, and they like to place any investments made into a particular theme, because that's how human minds are trained. For example, there are investors who bucket investments into seculars, where you can hopefully look to play them over long periods of time, whereas others have made tremendous amount of shareholder return in terms of doing it through cyclicals, some of which could be trading oriented, some of which could be slightly longer term. So in this discussion, we will speak to 3 fund managers, each of them with varying investment styles, but have built tremendous and robust track records over long periods in India. So the aim of this discussion is to leave you with an engaging discussion so that each investor understands their styles. I would also like to make it clear that if we do discuss any specific stocks, it's more to understand their individual thought process rather than from them saying they're looking to suggest anything from buying a stock today, because that's not the aim. So to take over, so Samit, I wanted to start off the discussion with you. So over time, considering you built a 10 plus year track record, right? I mean, the market at least knows you as someone who has a flavor of investing in B2B businesses, more so with an inclination towards mid and small caps, right? And also you've made it very clear in multiple discussions of yours that you prefer to look at structural businesses. So is there any, how would you define this industry type, and how you talk about your investing thought process here?
Sure. Naveen, thank you so much, and pleasure to be along with you, Charandeep and Mehul. See, I would say that first let me define what exactly I mean by cyclical stories. Right. So cyclical is stock price is something which is extremely volatile. Okay. Then the next thing which is little less volatile, but it's still volatile, is the earnings. Right. So in cyclical companies, the earnings, if you look at the long-term chart, say 20 years chart, and basically join the trough of the earnings, it typically is a straight line. It's a flat line, right? And they could go up in terms of top line, but when you look at their profitability, multiple times in a say 20 years period, they will go through losses. And the reason for that is that they have pretty huge fixed costs, and the selling price is not in their hands. So a typical example is metals. So metals, steel price or copper price is not in the hands of the companies. It is driven by more global factors. Whereas the cost is something which is completely unvariable. They can't get rid of most of the cost. There is employee cost, their licensing cost, the mining license that they pay for, and in addition to there is raw material cost. So because whenever the prices go down, they generally get go into losses, and that's where there is huge volatility in terms of the earnings when you look at these cycles. And that's what I define it as, a cyclical business. I would say it's very difficult to define an industry as cyclical business, because, for example, even within a steel industry, there will be companies. One of the companies which I talk about, is APL Apollo kind of companies, where they are also into steel businesses, but they buy HR coil, they add value, and create 2,000 different types of fabrication pipes, and they sell into the market. So for them, the biggest cost is the raw material cost. 75-80% of their cost is the raw material cost, but they're able to easily pass on that raw material cost, and they typically make that EBITDA per ton. So generally, it is in their control, of making the profits, and they almost never go into losses. So even if they are part of the same kind of an industry, their profit pool is very different. If you chart sort of their earnings profile, and say join the bottom of their trough earnings, it's an upward sloping line, and that's what you look for. So for me, a secural business or a structural business is more of business which has an upward sloping line. Now that the degree of that slope could be very different, right? So it could be 10% or it could be 30%. So there are different structural stories. What we look for is more of 20% plus kind of a upward sloping kind of a business, where they should not go into losses, and very little volatility in terms of the earnings.
Thanks a lot, Samit. That was a very insightful breakdown of how you look at businesses. Really helps to set the context going forward. Mehul, at your fund house, you had an illustrious career yourself across AMCs. Today, you are the principal listed equities manager for the IIFL AMC. You've taken a view to run both growth-oriented and cyclical portfolios within your AMC, right? The latest one being Phoenix that you've come out with. Where you have a very specific and interesting theme around how you look at businesses and playing turnarounds, very different from what Samit spoke about. So is there a thought process that you can enlighten around how you look at structurals versus cyclicals, and when you would be comfortable buying cyclicals?
Yeah, thanks, Naveen, and happy to be on this panel today. So, as Samit pointed out, everyone's definition of what is structural and what is cyclical is quite different. So what we tried to do, actually, one of the first things that we did was to, be very objective about this analysis, right? So how do you define, as per us, what is a structural business? It's something that's managing to deliver consistent ROE and growth over a long period of time. So what we did was we took the BSE 200 and we classified companies over the last 10-year performance as to how consistently. So if you've delivered more than 6 out of the last 10 years, more than 15% ROE with more than 15% profit growth, you've obviously got some secular tailwinds going for you, right? So that's what we classify as a secular company. Similarly, what is cyclical is typically profit growth can still be high, but ROEs tend to be less consistent. And therefore, they're slightly more cyclical in their orientation. And that's what we call cyclical companies that are delivering on growth, but have inconsistent return on capital ratios. And then we've got defensives, which have high ROE, but lower growth. And what we call value traps are companies that don't manage to deliver consistently on growth as well as ROE. But, the interesting part that we found using the back tests. So the back test obviously showed that if you bought seculars every single year based on an annual rebalance, you outperformed over a long period of time. And we could, do this back test over the last 15, 20-year period. But what is very interesting is the companies move quadrants, right? Companies that were secular in 2010, as per our definition, only 11% of those have remained secular now, right? So, when we did this back test in 2010, Tata Steel was classified as a secular company. Bharti Airtel was a secular company, right? And SBI used to deliver high profit growth with high ROE. And they're nowhere, they've all slipped into value traps as per our definition now, because over the last 10 years, there's been no ROE or growth over the last 10 years. And therefore, it's important to recognize that companies also go through long cycles. So you can have a 10-year period where the company is not delivering, but it's important to identify these inflection points where companies do come back as well. And so in our core strategy, we are overweight the secular quadrant. We want to be overweight seculars. We'll toggle between cyclicals and defensives depending on our orientation on the market. But what we saw last year, for example, was an opportunity in the market where a lot of the, let's say, secular growth sort of names were getting overpriced. And there was an opportunity to buy a lot of these beaten down cyclical sort of orientation businesses, which could come back. So the objective of the Phoenix and the turnaround strategy is to identify companies which could move up quadrants. So either they move from value trap to cyclical, they go from cyclical to secular over the next 3-4 years based on our earnings estimates. If something can migrate quadrants, that's where you see the maximum re-rating. And that's the aim of that strategy there. So it's a complementary strategy to our existing, let's say, more growth-oriented strategy that we run. But it's important to remember that companies don't remain structural or cyclical forever. They go through their own life cycles.
Thanks for that, Mehul. Very interesting, very different strategy. And I'll come back to you around going into some of the nuances of what you spoke about. Charandeep, again, you are one of the very few PMS managers in the country with a 10-year plus track record. Again, your strategy is extremely interesting, where you allow price strength to lead you into indicators, and then you get into the fundamentals. I think it'll be really interesting if the audience can hear from your shoes how you look at this and how you would define your investment philosophy.
Sure, Naveen. I'm happy to share my thoughts, but good morning to the eminent panel and good morning to you. And I thank all of you all to allow us, Girik Capital, the opportunity to present at this forum this morning. So, getting straight to the point, I would say, Naveen, that it's a lovely topic because I think perceptions and definitions, they change all the time, right? I think what Mehul just indicated, and I think it's very relevant, everybody defines things differently, right? Definition, I have seen secular defined as cyclical and secular defined as secular, and everybody keeps changing this. Now, Girik's been around long enough, right? We had a year of inception in 2009 to see these changes. And, I think for your viewers, it's probably most relevant to give examples of what this means, because I think examples always kind of help explain the thought process. So let me give you a few examples, right? ITC in 2010, beautiful secular. It's a different matter that there have been very limited returns since then, but today things have changed. Trends have changed. ESG has come. Cigarettes are not the fancy. They get low multiples, and your perception around the stock has changed. Right. Let's go back 2 more years. 2008. Just think about a couple of names like Larsen and Toubro and DLF. So sitting in 2007. I think a lot of people would have said that infrastructure and real estate build out in India is just secular. It has to come. To me, there is a secular trend. It's just a question of the companies in the sector being able to capture the opportunity and there being an ecosystem for the same. So it doesn't always add up that simply in investing. To define something as a cyclical trend and then invest in it accordingly can be a very dangerous thing. I'll give you a more controversial example. Today. Now let's look at where we are today. 2010 again, you had the consumer sector, the FMCG sector, so to speak, defined as defensive. Okay, pharma FMCG in India has traditionally been defensive, but today it's growth. So how you define whether you want to call it growth or value, defensive or secular? These are just terms that market participants coin from time to time, and the selection of stocks changes all the time. One last example. HDFC Bank in 2008 was 2 to 3% of the index. I'm not sure. Today it's close to 9%. At that time, SBI and ICICI were meant to be the winner-take-alls, right? They were meant to be the real growth stories, the sexy oomph, high growth stories. ICICI was expanding to different parts of the world, getting into different businesses. HDFC was that boring old bank that would grow a certain amount, right? Perceptions have changed in 10 years. Now, when it comes to Girik and how we try to capture trends, opportunities, how we identify, I think you introduced us correctly. We try to be, I will coin 3 terms: unbiased, uncomfortable, and open-minded, right? What does a screener do for you? It should be throwing out ideas to you that are new, have an element of newness to them, that are not necessarily looked at by the street, and where it's kind of uncomfortable to go and invest money. So that's typically what we like when we look at our screener. Our screener does that, and yes, there's a huge element of price acceleration and earnings acceleration on a historical basis in our screeners. We've designed these now over 12 years. We've continued to improve them because, we believe that there's a big funnel of companies. How do you narrow down what to look at? How do you narrow down? How do you get to those 50, 60 addressable universe of companies? That's where we spend maximum amount of time before we go into bottom-up fundamental research to find secular opportunities that may work out over the next decade. So we don't like to define. We like to be very open-minded. And I think that's what would, hopefully keep our investors earning better returns over time.
Thanks a lot, Charandeep. I think a lot to digest from very unique investment styles across 3 fairly illustrious managers. So to take this conversation into the next level, right, Samit, again, not to tell the audience that APL Apollo is a good business or a bad business, that's not the objective. But let's say that very interesting business, in a commoditized business, you called it structural, right? Considering what Mehul and Charandeep spoken about, where businesses do transition from secular to cyclical, do you believe, or rather, how does one think about identifying the risks of this transition? Do you think there is a risk with this business as an example, or any other business that you want to take up? And how do you think about this transition if one was to worry about this risk?
Sure. See, again, as Mehul and Charandeep spoke about, it's extremely difficult to really define a secular and cyclical story. It's all, you only know it in hindsight. It's very difficult. See, for me, it's all about an individual business. It's completely bottoms up, right? So I don't really care whether it's in, which industry it is in. It could be in an industry which is completely flat, right? So I'll just continue with the APL Apollo kind of an example, right? It is into these structural, steel pipes, fabrication pipes. And I don't think the industry has gone anywhere, in terms of the volume. There has rarely been a growth, right? So, see, I think it's very important for an investor to focus on the supply side. How is the supply panning over a period of time? And, as I always keep on speaking, it's all about, for me, it's all about who can gain market share, in an industry. So an industry could be a zero growth industry, but if there is a there are a lot of players who are not able to survive, and one dominant player who has such a big edge, that gap between that dominant player and the rest of the competition, I think is one of the most important aspect, irrespective of which industry it is in, right? And if that player is going to eliminate many of these weaker players, basically your supply side is get shrinking. And that imbalance between demand and supply is what gives pricing power as well as growth. And that is very important. I mean, even like Amazon is a similar example, right? Where it just killed the competition. Growth hasn't been as phenomenal as what Amazon has grown at. It's more of they have been able to just take away the market share from all these brick and mortar smaller players. So if you look for such kind of phenomenon in any stock that you look for, I think it gives you a lot of clarity, and it takes away a lot of moving parts. Because for me, the problem with sort of getting into cyclical stocks, I mean, cyclical stocks, like a Tata Steel, if you look at its history from say 2001 to today, it's probably given similar returns to what Asian Paints or any of the consumer long-term structural story has given. The problem is with the volatility of returns. The majority of the returns were from 2001 to 2005-6 or 7. Beyond that, we have had until last year 15 years without any returns. In between, you could have a 1x or 2x kind of returns, but then if you are not an expert in that field, it's all about timing. That even now, see the way it's very difficult to put a P multiple to such businesses. Maybe you can put a price to book multiple, because earnings is something which is no guarantee at all. Right? At least the book is little less volatile. So the price to book moves from half a times price to book towards maybe 4 times what we saw in 2007, right? And the earnings, and the price to book, I mean, the book also can go up 2x or 3x in a cycle, right? So you can have 3x multiplied by 4x, like a 12x kind of a return, or you could have something which just stops at 2x. You never know. And if you are not tracking that, stock very closely, you are too late to identify that. And for a fund manager, see, for an individual investor, he can look at point-to-point kind of returns. But for a fund manager who keeps on getting money every day, I mean, once that 5x return happens in 1 year, and if I was lucky enough to show the performance, majority of my funds will come after 1 year when that entire cycle is played out. So it's an extremely tricky thing for a fund manager to do. And the only thing you can do is just focus on bottoms up businesses where you have much better handle, rather than looking at all these moving parts where you have no control over.
Fair point, Samit. And I think you also raised an interesting issue about the fund management business and why you've chosen to do what you're doing. It's very interesting. So with this as a context, Mehul, you launched around the SCDV framework a Phoenix strategy, right? So let's say if I was to play devil's advocate for a moment, back in 2017, because I don't want to go back way in history, back in 2017, we had the same theme saying SBI, cyclicals, infrastructure, the recovery story is coming, the capex cycle is coming. So from an investor's shoe, or rather from your shoes, why now around Phoenix, and how does one get comfort around the fact that today is better than 2017 and the cyclical story is going to play out today?
Yeah, so it's an interesting point, and I think Samit raised some very interesting points there about the consistency of returns, right? And which is why, the core of our strategy, our flagship strategy still focuses around being overweight what we classify as, let's say, secular growth companies. The Phoenix strategy was more opportunistic. I think what we noticed over the last 1 year was just the number of opportunities and the ability to allocate capital to a large number of opportunities was just much more than what we had seen over the last few years. It was a bit like the 2013 type, post taper tantrum sort of moment, where you could buy a lot of good quality businesses at book value or below book value, where you could see, an improvement trend in ROE. And usually, when ROEs start improving and, cross the 10 to 12% mark and start going northwards of 15%, stocks tend to do quite well, right? The maximum re-rating happens when you start crossing that cost of capital type ROE. And that's what we noticed. There was a lot of companies available, good quality businesses available at very attractive prices over the last 1 year. The opportunity set has shrunk a bit, obviously over the last 6 months, with the rally that we've seen. But we still feel, just given where we are in the economic cycle, there is still probably more juice left in these sort of businesses to re-rate over the next 2 to 3 years. That's not to say that the quality, high growth, high ROE sort of businesses which have already been delivering over the last decade or so will not deliver. It's just that there is slightly more alpha, in some of these more cyclical sort of businesses right now. That's the only reason why we launched this additional strategy. The other point I'd just like to add to what I was saying earlier about companies going through their own life cycles and just giving some more examples around that. BHEL in 2010 was secular, right? I mean, if you look back at that point of time, you would think power sector, India is given the population, we're going to need so many more power plants. BHEL is the market leader. They'll keep growing forever, etc. And that's become a value trap. You look at the performance over the last 10 years and what's happened. So it's very difficult to just go by past track record and look at and classify companies as secular. You have to be aware of changes that are taking place in the company, in the industry, in the management. There are lots of factors that could, change the trajectory of the business. And therefore, as both Charanjit and Samit have pointed out, bottom-up analysis is ultimately the key, right? Just identifying companies at the right point is very important.
Got it, Noel. Thanks so much for that. So Charanjit, you laid out some interesting points when you were introducing your strategy, right? I mean, you spoke about examples as well, because obviously examples make people connect. You spoke about ITC, you spoke about SBI. They've been so-called secular businesses, they've struggled. Now, again, if I was to play the role of a devil's advocate, it's very nice with the benefit of hindsight. But how does one basically know that actually they were not meant to be seculars? And today, the so-called cyclicals have a potential to translate into shareholder returns. Is it always with the benefit of hindsight, or is there slightly more of a nuanced statement that one can make from your shoes?
I think you're right. With the benefit of hindsight is always very dangerous. It's easy for me to sit here and quote these examples, right? When you're actually managing money, as Samit said, you need to get down to doing what you do well, right? See, the beauty about our capital market is it's large and it's grown, right? It's given tons of young managers, and it continues to give tons of managers an opportunity to participate in different and varying styles. I'm digressing a little here, but I meet young managers every day, and they sometimes make me feel ancient, right? Because when we started Girik, we were obviously much younger, but today, you have guys doing all kinds of algo strategies, and they come in a very unbiased manner, and that's really beautiful, right? That's what's beautiful about investing. There's room for every single style, right? In fact, I'll tell you, when it comes to our style at Girik, and talking about price, we were so shy to market ourselves and to talk about what we were doing, because we were like, will people really understand this? Won't they think that this is, too churn heavy or too trading heavy? Or, how can you use price as a determinant to screen? And it's very counterintuitive even today to many, right? But, what I try to tell people is, one thing that every fund manager needs to do is have a process and a style, right? So what we try to do well is, we try to eliminate all our biases through processes. We're very process driven, right? We don't define. Again, when you tell me that, what do I think will be cyclical and will make money in the next 3 years? We don't really even think like that, right? We don't really even think like that. You try to look with a blank lens. You try to get your process set up. You're looking at those 500 to 600 companies, screening on them daily. And you're hoping something new comes up on that screener once in a while, and then you put it into investigation. And again, let me lead with an example here. Tata Steel has been mentioned on this forum. Samit mentioned Tata Steel, how the returns have been volatile, and he's absolutely right. The returns have been there on different occasions, but very volatile. It by no means is a defensive business. Okay, that's a word I'd like to use, defensive. Okay, allow me to do that, because there are businesses that are genuinely defensive. Okay, other than that, I wouldn't like to go into defining, because it's all our own perception and our own bias, and that's what we are fighting every day as fund managers. But if you look at Tata Steel now, I would give you a live example of how it came up on our screeners in April, May, June, July, and our biases kept ignoring it, saying no crappy business, no bad capital allocation. It didn't check any box on a fundamental basis. Coming out of a decade of horrible capital allocation, and to add to that, there's bad news every day that you hear about steel companies, that they're crap and they never make money, and all those kinds of things. But when something came up on our screener, and the stock was literally doubling every 3 months, right? We finally bit the bullet and said, listen, let's go into our investigation. Let's follow our process, right? This is maybe it's just our bias. तो उस पे आप काम करोगे तो पता चलेगा अंदर क्या है. But steel पे at that point, Tata Steel was making 1,500 crore rupees a quarter in the quarter in which we bought it. The very next quarter, the profits were 7,000 crore. It was so obvious that cycle was turning in such a large and meaningful way, and the global ecosystem had changed meaningfully, such that there was significant money on the table. So this is an example. I'm trying to give examples to your viewers so that hopefully they can relate to what we are talking about. This is an example of trying to follow a process and eliminating bias and not defining anything. Because I think we're very against that definition of cyclical and secular and this and that. But that said, like I said, there are definitely defensive businesses, lower risk businesses in the long term that would have an element of they'll probably survive through more cycles than many businesses. I do agree that yes, there would be some of those businesses.
Got it, Charandeep. While I would like to keep discussing topics with you guys, I've been told that we only have 5 to 7 minutes. So I have 2 questions that I need to ask each one of you. First one, Samit, I have to be the devil's advocate here, so you have to be patient with me. As a structural business, right? It's all lovely. Human brain likes to own growth, loans, structural businesses, long term. But then the counter argument is valuations are too high. Right. So how do you reconcile to that, and how do you think investors should be thinking about this valuation dilemma around structural businesses?
Sure. See, I mean, for me, just as part of the philosophy is that business always comes first, and then valuation follows. If it meets the business criteria, only then you move towards valuation. It's not the reverse, right? So I'm completely fine being compromising a bit on valuation. So even if if I think that the fair value should be 25 times and I get it at say 35 times, I'm okay, because after all, I'm looking for high growth companies, where ideally 25% kind of growth, right? So if I get the valuation wrong a bit, okay, I'll maybe not make returns for a year or year and a half. That's okay. That's a risk I can afford. But if I get the business wrong, I can have a permanent loss. Where if I say get into a cyclical stocks, where cyclical meaning the way I defined it, where the fixed cost is something which is not variable, whereas the pricing is not in the hands of the company. As Charandeep mentioned, Tata Steel 1,500 crores to 7,500 crores, or it could have been minus 3,500 to 7,000 crores, right? So that kind of volatility. How do you apply a P multiple on that? So sometimes on a P multiple it looks really cheap, but then suddenly that 7,000 crores just vanishes, and you are left holding. And I've done that mistake. I've done mistakes where as soon as the seemingly structural story, having huge margin, maybe at the peak margin, you end up paying really low P multiple, but those margins just vanish, and then the P multiple, go half, and then you're left holding, worthless kind of a thing. So from that point, I said, for me, business is something where I just cannot compromise. If I really like the business, let me compromise a bit on the valuation. And again, for me, structural is not something that, it is something that you need to observe on a daily basis. It's not something that you know that this is a 20-year structural story. If you end up playing that kind of structural story, you end up paying also huge valuations, right? So it is something which I say that 3 to 5 years, something which is little easier, to predict, is something I would go after and just execute that.
Got it, Samit. Perfect. Mehul, from your side, considering you're launching a mix of both secular as well as cyclical businesses, right? Obviously, I'll have to go into the cyclical bucket because it's always hard. Very few people get it right, but when you get it right, it's extremely rewarding as well. So how do you know when you're not making a mistake? How do you think about an exit of a cyclical business? Not when you're getting it right, but when you're getting it wrong. Is there a framework that you use for that?
Yeah. So the idea when we're trying to buy some of these, let's say, turnaround opportunities is we have some thesis as to why the ROE or the growth will improve, right? So we're trying to find a catalyst for that change. So those catalysts could be internal as well as external. So internal could be better capital allocation or a management or a promoter change. There could be some business restructuring that's taking place within the company. There could be external changes in the industry, a competitor who's falling out. There could be, some geographical changes that are taking place in terms of new product launches. So there could be various reasons why we believe the growth prospects or the return on capital prospects for the company are improving. And that's why, we believe that the turnaround in that company could take place. And usually that's what we'll keep testing for, right? Over the next few years or few quarters to begin with, at least, just make sure that thesis is playing out. As long as that thesis is on the right track, we'll continue to hold the company and believe that the re-rating will take place. If for whatever reason something goes against what we believe, then we have to exit. I mean, it's as simple as that. It's just a function of what the underlying thesis is for the change. And if that thesis is getting challenged for any reason, then that's the point at which you want to exit. And so it's a very simplistic way of looking at things. But I think, as Charandeep and Samit have been pointing out, this is all very bottom-up work, right? You need to understand the company. I think Tata Steel, again, just going back to that example, because it's become like the favorite example in the market right now. But if you understand the company and have a reason why you believe that the company will do well, there's no reason why you shouldn't own Tata Steel, right? So we didn't participate in Tata Steel. We couldn't understand it. We just didn't have the ability to understand, the supply-demand equation there, and we missed it. But we don't regret that because, you have to buy what you understand, what you can make a case for. And that's how we work.
Thanks, Mehul. Charandeep, coming quickly to you. So we spoke about the risk of structural business moving to cyclical with Samit, right? Mm-hmm. And you've been very categorical. You don't like bucketing. But at the same time, a business which is cyclical, where profits, let's say, are volatile, have you seen it actually moving to a structural bucket over time in your investment experience? And also, have you got it wrong in terms of looking at a cyclical business in terms of your indicators, and how did you actually exit even though it was a mistake?
Look, the half of investing is mistakes. So we made tons of mistakes. We're not shy to say that. We're not shy to acknowledge, admit, and cut our losers. That's real philosophy at Girik. We believe in that. We believe in risk management. I think a fund manager needs to know how to manage risk and have a system to address when you're wrong, what do you do, right? Not fall in love, not get biased. So I think that is the risk aspect to it and the mistakes aspect to it. I think what you're trying to ask me is that, have I seen cyclical businesses become secular? I think if you're traditionally trying to define those cyclical businesses as Tata Steel as one example, see, there are a couple of aspects to it. See, one must really understand the business, okay? So what is the cycle in a business? Rather than calling it cyclical, let's try to understand the cycle in the business. Now, if you look at a Tata Steel, let's go back for 30 years. And is there a secularity in the demand for steel in India? Yes, there is. It's grown at higher than GDP, the volumes. What's the cyclical element? There are two. the price and the raw material, right? Has the business been able to kill this cyclicality in any manner? I don't think price, that will always be cyclical. That's just demand and supply driven, right? Then let's look at the raw material side. You can address it with good capital allocation, access to raw material. You can take care of a lot of your risks over there. So as far as a business's cycle, like a Tata Steel, it will be down to the price. You can't help that, right? When you're doing your analysis, if you're smart enough, you'll be able to tell, right, that, okay, you're going into price damage mode. You'll have to price the stock accordingly. You'll have to, I mean, if the street is doing something stupid, like giving it really high price earnings multiples on, steel prices increasing and going to abnormal levels, I mean, you have to ultimately decide what you need to do. There may not be enough IRR on the table. The street may have factored in many, many years in advance the kind of money that, or you're making all the money for the next 10 years. It tends to happen with these stocks. So I'm only trying to give an example of how these traditionally cyclical commodity kind of businesses do tend to play out, because this has happened over history. The only thing I would say is the structural element of these, some of these good quality cyclicals that you would want to call are the demand element. The fact that in India, a lot of the supply side is getting concentrated, small guys going out of business, less and less people in the business. So, maybe 80-90% of the steel supply in India is with 4 or 5 guys now. That wasn't the case 10 years ago. Does that give you a structural element? Sure, it does. So I think, yes, you can see that. Look at what happened in the pipe sector, right? I don't think anybody would have imagined that would have been defined by the street as a structural business. People are defining it and valuing these companies like, Astral, etc., as secular businesses. So things do change. I've seen cyclical, move into structural for various reasons. Maybe people have branded it. Pipe, again, there are 3 or 4 makers in India now. There are not many who control bulk of the market. So, again, it's about perception.
Thanks for that, Charandeep. And before we wind up, I think 3 investment managers, very unique styles, very different in nature. It's important to understand who you respect as managers. So I just wanted to wind up by asking each of one of you, is there one global CIO or Indian CIO or fund manager whose thought process you resonate with, who you think you would value for eternity?
Okay, so I'll start. See, for me, everyone knows about Warren Buffett and all that, but I like Joel Greenblatt because even I am pretty data driven, and I like to study history and maybe like Charandeep said, build screeners filtering, because that's where you start. That's where it is. And you're just looking at how Joel Greenblatt, with a simplistic process, delivered phenomenal. I mean, pre-fees his returns were 50%. So that's someone I really respect. And of course, I mean, Charlie Munger is someone who basically changed Warren Buffett's thinking style, on focusing on business, rather than just value. And I would say, that data focus as well as business focus, I would like that combination.
Yeah, I mean, just as Samit pointed out, there's a lot to learn from all of these great fund managers across the world, and Warren and Charlie are right up there. But I like Peter Lynch. I just like to point out Peter Lynch because, like I mentioned earlier, that simple philosophy of buy things that you understand is a good framework to start with, at least for anyone, especially for retail investors as well. Just keep things simple. Buy things that you can relate to. Buy things that you can understand. Buy companies that you see in your day-to-day life. That's a good starting point for anyone to start investing.
Yeah, I think whereas Warren Buffett probably goes down as the ultimate investor with the ultimate style, the only reason he's difficult to follow for fund managers is because he's not managing other people's money. He's managing his own money, and I would urge investors, everybody should follow Warren Buffett, because if you have a really, really long-term horizon, and it's a great way to invest. If you can replicate what Buffett does, then Buffett it is. But as far as a fund manager is concerned, I'm totally with Mehul. I think Peter Lynch goes down as probably one of the most respected and somebody that whose style can really be copied and relied upon, because he goes into products, newness of products, growth companies, and he was able to deliver consistent returns in a fund setup, which is not easy to do at all over a very long period of time.
Thanks a lot, Charandeep, and thanks to everyone for taking the time out.